this program, we'll be talking about touch. First about skin, which is its primary organ. Next about the hand, a remarkable tool that gives us considerable power over the world. And finally, we will give you an overview of the latest research on rebuilding skin. Would you be able to recognize someone you know very well with your eyes covered just by touching him with your fingers? Not easy for sure, but possible. No two skins are the same. They can be more or less fine, more or less elastic, flaccid or granular, hairy or completely smooth. Skin is both our door to the world and the mirror of our soul. We can't lie about our feelings because our skin reveals them. Are you among those who have a tendency to blush? Then you know you can't hide your confusion, your embarrassment, or excitement. But our skin is not merely a source of pleasure, comfort, or information. It is an organ and a sense, just like sight and hearing. Touch is the very first sense to inform children of the world around them. Even the 8-week-old fetus is so sensitive, it will react to the slightest pressure. Through their skin, fetuses are constantly informed of the conditions around them and are thus able to adapt to them. Touch continues to play a primary role during birth. The contractions of the uterus during labor and delivery give the baby intense tactile stimulation. This tactile stimulation helps to make the baby breathe and therefore makes his adaptation to the air world easier. The close contact of the newborn's lips and fingers when he suckles his mother's breast also play an important role. Through this intimate contact, the infant learns of his mother's existence and at the same time becomes conscious of his own existence. Touch is the basis of all human relationships. Touch also contributes to a child's intellectual development. By touching everything within reach, a baby gathers all sorts of information about nature and the size and properties of objects. Through tactile exploration, the child learns about the architecture of the world. Skin, the largest of all human organs, is the center of touch. Skin is made up of 3 layers of cells: the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. In each of these layers of cells are implanted hairs, sebaceous glands, which secrete perspiration, and a host of other little organs called receptors. We have several kinds of receptors, each one registering a specific tactile sensation. There are the Merkel receptors, located in the epidermis, which respond to a light touch. Meissner's corpuscles, present in the dermis, are sensitive to texture and locate the object's point of contact with the body. The hairs also serve as tactile receptors. When lightly touched, the nerve endings at their base are stimulated. Pacini's corpuscles, located in the deeper layers of the dermis, respond to pressure, tension, and vibrations. Other receptors are sensitive to variations in body temperature. Krauss's corpuscles are activated when the temperature drops. Ruffini's corpuscles, on the contrary, respond to an increase in temperature. Because the heat receptors are more deeply implanted than the cold receptors, our skin is usually less sensitive to heat than to cold. And if you get a better indication of the temperature of water with your elbow than with your hand, it's because elbow skin is thinner. The skin also contains nerve endings to register a special sensation: pain. When very intense stimulation is exerted on the skin, these nerve endings react by sending a danger signal to the brain. The brain will promptly respond to remove the body from the source of pain. The quantity of cutaneous tactile receptors varies a great deal from one area of the body to another. Areas with an abundance of receptors, such as fingertips, lips, and the tongue, are more sensitive than other parts of the body. Also, they enable us to distinguish sensations that are closer together. For example, our tongue or the tips of our fingers can discern stimulations only 2 millimeters apart, whereas our back or calves are only able to discern stimulations separated by at least 5 centimeters. When our cutaneous sensory receptors are stimulated, they emit nerve signals. The signals travel along the spinal cord to a region in the brain called the sensory cortex, which analyzes tactile sensations. Each part of our body corresponds to a specific region of the sensory cortex. Very sensitive regions, such as the lips, tongue, and fingers, occupy a far greater area than less sensitive ones, like the torso or legs. With the information received, the sensory cortex evaluates the location, texture, temperature, and even the three-dimensional shape of the object touched. This mechanism is so accurate, it can replace vision. The sense of touch goes on to play an important role throughout our lives. Indeed, tactile sensations are also sent to the brain's limbic system, which is responsible for emotions. The cutaneous sensations received during intercourse are largely responsible for sexual pleasure. Touch remains a very special means of contact with others and the world around us. In some cases, the sensitivity of the skin receptors is highly developed. In people who are visually impaired, for instance, the tips of their fingers become so sensitive to pressure that their skin virtually replaces their eyes. In the Braille alphabet, each letter is composed of a series of between 1 and 6 raised dots in a small square, like dominoes. The blind recognize the positioning of the dots and are able to read at an amazing speed. And then there's the subtlety of our hands' movements. A lobster claw has its advantages. We may envy the strength of a gorilla's grasp, but there is only the human hand that can play a prelude by Rachmaninoff. By giving us two hands, nature presented us with the two most sophisticated tools in the world. These tools are able to perform the most complex of tasks and obtain detailed information about the world at the same time. The human hand owes its dexterity to its high complexity. Consisting of 27 bones and a multitude of tendons and muscles, the hand can take on countless configurations and move in all directions. But the most important faculty of the hand is its ability to grasp and handle objects. That ability is called prehension. Many animals are also capable of picking up an object with their paws, to bring food to their mouths, for instance. But prehension only attains perfection in the human species. This perfection is the result of a particular movement of the thumb, the movement of opposition. The thumb is said to be opposable to the other 4 digits of the hand to form pincers or grips. Apart from man, only apes can make the opposition movement. But the faculty is limited in apes. The human thumb, which can move in 5 different directions, is much more mobile. Without its opposable thumb, the human hand would be no more prehensile than a fish gill. The countless tasks a hand can perform are all based on 2 major movements, the power grip and the precision grip. The power grip is performed by the combined action of the surface of the fingers and of the palm of the hand, the thumb only being used to direct the action. This enables you to carry out tasks requiring little precision, but a great deal of power. The precision grip, however, is carried out using the tip of the thumb and the 4 other digits. To pick up small objects, we only use our thumb and index and middle fingers, whereas we use a 5-digit hold to handle larger objects. Precision holds are used when we want to perform tasks requiring little power, but a great deal of dexterity. The performance of a set of tasks requires a series of strength and precision holds. The hand would be a useless tool were it not commanded by our brain and guided by our eyes. Most tasks performed by our hands require a concerted effort on the part of all 3 organs. Such action brings into play highly complex mechanisms. When we wish to pick up an object, for instance, we begin by locating and identifying the object visually. The data collected by the eyes is analyzed in a region of the brain called the visual cortex, and then transmitted to another region called the motor cortex. The motor cortex directs the movements of the body's muscles. It sends orders to the arm muscles to reach toward the object we want to pick up. It commands the hand to open, the fingers to position themselves, and commands the picking up of the object. When it touches the object, the hand receives tactile sensations. These sensations, immediately analyzed in the brain's sensory cortex, enable us to adjust our grip. Able to adapt to all shapes, the hand nonetheless favors certain movements, movements which require the least expenditure of energy. The thumb thus prefers to move at an angle of approximately 45 degrees in relation to the principal axis of the hand. This biological fact has an important consequence. Most of the objects we use are designed to meet the hand's preferences and reflect its form. If man were equipped with prehensile organs other than hands, he would design tools quite differently. Both a sensory organ and a work tool, the human hand is also an amazing communicator. Hand gestures often accompany speech, but they can also replace speech completely. The deaf have communicated among themselves in sign language for a great many years. Their languages are as sophisticated as spoken language and enable their users to express ideas just as subtly. Also, sign languages are learned by deaf children in the same way as spoken languages are learned by children without a hearing deficiency. In addition to being involved in all aspects of daily life, the hand has played a major role in the evolution of our species. Climatic change brought early man to his feet, which freed his hands. He began to make tools and to perform complicated tasks. Little by little, these changes in lifestyle caused the brain to increase in size and power. Man's hand is the very source of his intelligence. We're inclined to think of skin as a sort of extremely tight-fitting garment whose role is purely aesthetic. It's too bad it's only when it has been severely damaged that we realize how important it is. Third-degree burn victims, for instance, suffer excruciating pain. Scientists dream of being able to unroll a fine film of new skin over their burns. It's no longer an impossible dream. Recently, scientists have been able to use the exceptional regenerative capacity of skin cells to produce skin in a test tube. It is the first time that a human organ has been created from isolated cells. Without knowing it, day and night, we wear a sophisticated bodysuit, skin. That suit plays a crucial role in protecting our organism from outside invasion. But this living covering is delicate. Fire in particular can seriously damage it. When burns cover a major portion of the body, it can jeopardize life. The skin consists of 3 layers. The epidermis, on the surface, is made up of 15 to 20 layers of cells called Malpighian cells. Under the epidermis lies the dermis. The dermis, the epidermis's nutrient tissue, contains the blood vessels, nerves, and sensory organs. Under the dermis lies the hypodermis, a layer largely made up of adipose cells. The severity of a burn depends on the size of the surface it covers and on its depth. Superficial burns, called first-degree burns, only affect the epidermis. However, second-degree burns affect the dermis in varying degrees. In third-degree burns, the entire skin is destroyed. Second- and third-degree burns alter vital cutaneous functions. The treatment of third-degree burn victims consists of restoring these essential functions. The treatments are carried out in special burn units, which are kept in rigorously sterile conditions. One of the skin's main purposes is to prevent bacteria from entering the organism. When that barrier is destroyed, our body becomes open to numerous infections. Skin also prevents the loss of fluids and regulates body heat. Third-degree burn victims therefore require vast amounts of liquid and heat. However, in most cases, a skin graft is necessary to complete the treatment. When the dermis has been deeply burnt, like in third-degree burns, the skin loses its capacity to regenerate. A skin graft is the only means to rebuild the body's cutaneous covering. One of the techniques used is the mesh graft. It consists of taking skin from other parts of the patient's body, cutting it into a thin mesh, and then transplanting it onto the burned area. In time, the skin grows into the mesh and reforms into an unbroken covering. However, there are several disadvantages to this technique. The taking of living tissue adds to the excruciating pain the burn victim is already suffering. Moreover, the skin that reforms from the grafts keeps a net-like appearance for a long time. Researchers are therefore attempting to find a way to regenerate large surfaces of the epidermis of burn victims using only a few square centimeters of skin. This new technique is based on the possibility of cultivating human epidermis cells in laboratory. A sample of healthy skin measuring between 4 and 6 square centimeters is first taken from the victim. The epidermis is separated from the dermis in the laboratory and cut into tiny pieces. An enzyme is then added, trypsin. The trypsin causes the epidermis cells to detach one from the other. The researchers can then sow up to 2 billion epidermis cells per culture flask. The flasks contain a nutritive environment that promotes the cell's growth. The flasks are incubated at a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, the temperature of the human body. The epidermis cells multiply rapidly. In 10 to 14 days, they form a continuous sheet at the bottom of the flasks. This living sheet of tissue, similar to natural epidermis, is ready to be grafted. However, if the surface to be covered is large, new cultures can be started from that first sheet. Numerous such sheets of epidermis can thus be produced. They are placed on Vaseline-covered gauze, which are then placed upside down over the areas to be regenerated. Within a few days, new skin covers the burns, and the gauze falls off by itself. This cultivated epidermis takes on the main functions of the skin. It is resistant, waterproof, and protects the body against mechanical and bacterial harm. Also, should the skin be injured, it heals normally. It therefore constitutes a permanent covering. Researchers are trying to accelerate the production of epidermis, since the procedure now requires from 4 to 5 weeks. Thanks to techniques such as these, enormous progress has been made in treating burn victims. However, there still remains much to be done to improve their quality of life. Our skin is closely associated to the image we have of ourselves, and the one we project to others. Skin diseases are particularly awful because they become a stigma visible to all. That's why it's so important to keep that flesh wrapping of ours intact.